Hey everybody, as promised I wanted to give you a quick overview of how you can use online resources such as Perseus to figure out a little bit more about your lexical research project. Again, those projects are due Thursday in class. So first let's find out how we can look up a word. I'd want you to go to this website, so if you're going to do that it'd be perseus.tus, let me get that in, and then hopper, and then /morph. That'll get you to this page. It will default you to Greek. You'll want to just select Latin, and the Greek keyboard kind of legend will go away, and that's just fine. So let's pick a word that we just had in our reading, and we don't even need to look it up in the dictionary and know how to conjugate it, because that's part of this morphological study tool. You can put in a declined noun, and it will give you different possibilities for what that noun actually will be. So you'll enter it, you'll click go, and then hopefully it will respond faster than it did for me. And then here we have it, ramus, a branch, a bough, a twig. So we can go to any of these, elementary Lewis, but that's going to give us short answers. We want the full Lewis and short A Latin dictionary. And then we see that now it's kind of pumped us down. It was ablative dative plural. We could have guessed that, and if you did your reading you would know that it was. So here now we get a number of details coming up. We learned this is a long A, that's fine, and this is, you see that it's for radmus, that there was a D there, but that D was lost in anticipation of this M, and then this seems to come from a Sanskrit, which it means Sanskrit root, varda. And then we have crescere here, which to grow. So this is also where we get a word like radix, which is a root, and also the root, the linguistic root of our word radish, and radius, things that come out from a central point. That's what a branch is. So we don't get any sense of what varda means, but at least we have it. So then we have definition number 1. And then we have A here, branch, bough, twig. Then we get some, this CF means confere, compare to circulus termes. These will be other words that similarly do this. Now we get a long listing of different instances of this work. So already we can see certain similarities to what we just saw in Pliny. We don't actually see Pliny's section here, but we see the ramus compared to the truncus. So trunk and bough, these are things to think about. And then here folia, the leaves. We're getting everything. And this is Cicero in one of his works. We have more works being cited here. You don't need to worry about all of the abbreviations, although some of them might look familiar to you. Virgil's Aeneid, Virgil's Georgics, Horace's Carmina, that is the poems commonly known as the odes. So we have all this information, but really I want you to ignore all this blue stuff and focus in on the definitions, and especially these in kind of roots, the etymology of it, which will always be, if they know it, right up with the noun. So then we have, that's literal meaning, that's what the lit here, and then this B, this transfer, is a kind of transferred meaning, a transference. So a branch of a stag's antlers. So we're not talking about a tree anymore, but we know that a deer's antlers look much like the branches of a tree. It would make sense to use ramus there, or a spur of a mountain chain, another thing that we might easily see. So we're seeing that the ramus really is closer to this idea of a radius, of something that moves out radically from the center to the periphery, whether it's a stag's antlers, a mountain chain, the membrum virile, that's a euphemism, we know what that means, things that are sticking out. And then we also have, I don't even know what trop means here, you can probably look it up, but of a branch of consanguinity. Oh, that's a nice Latin word. But we understood some of this from our readings of Livy, when we were talking about how in early struggles between the kings, they'd want to remove the whole root, the whole branch, the whole family tree. So we get some of these different meanings. So if you were going to talk about ramus, you would talk about this meaning, how it's connected to this, and this doesn't need to be all clear. You're just reporting on the information that you can grab, there's no, though we get the full sense of everything that Ramus can be here, there's no explicit thing from Lewis and Short that says, oh, it's about things leaving from the center and taking up more space. That's really something that you can provide just from looking at the various things that it means. So that's useful right there, I think, as a good example. Let's maybe come up with a verb from our latest reading that we can also follow. How about defundebatur? So we had just had this. So we can either go back on our page or we can just type it in here. All caps all of a sudden. Hey, I do it on the computer too. Defundebatur. Again, it would be nice if you had looked up in the dictionary. You already had the first principle part ready to go, but the nice thing about Perseus' Latin word study tool is you can just put it in, fully conjugated, fully declined, and then you're able to say, oh, it's a verb, third singular, imperfect, indicative, passive. Well, we knew that already. Let's again go to Lewis and Short to get the full detail. So it will load here. So as I said, diff is kind of separated from fundo. Fundo is really the origin of the word. Fudi, fusum, it's a third declension, or sorry, third conjugation verb. So verb to spread by pouring, to pour out, pour forth. So it applies most properly to water, and we see these examples here in the literal section. But then again, quickly we get into the transferred meanings of objects not liquid, to spread, to scatter, to diffuse. This would be a good place for Pliny's example to come up. And indeed, we have Pliny using it in another letter book 2, letter 17, but we don't see 6:16 here, so they're not actually referring to ours. So then we also have more generally spread, diffuse, scatter. It could be a lot of things. Again, we might see if Pliny shows up in any of this, but I'm not seeing him. We have this even further meaning, something that's different, to cheer up, glad, and exhilarate. So here they have this idea. Lewis and Short actually give us some idea of how these things are connected. This idea of non-restraint freedom. If you're pouring forth in all things, you can. What does it mean to emotionally pour forth? Well, that might be confiding all of your sadnesses, but it also could be your joys, and you'll feel better with things flowing freely in yourself. So this is some of the various meanings. Then we can also see that these things can become, diffuse prolix. We're talking about pouring forth, as I often do in lecture and right now, into these long speeches that just spread out uncontrollably. That's the sort of thing that we're looking at. So what you would do if you had all this going on is you would say, well, we have all of this, let's summarize that, but we might also want to, for the etymology at least, go back to fundo and to pour out, to shed. That's exactly what we're looking for. And then we get here the kind of deeper etymology of it. It's related to this Greek root, kie, and you can copy and paste these things. You don't need to learn how to type Greek. If you also know how to transliterate, you can just do that. But then you can also see some of the things that it might be related to, futio, futilis, all these things also in Latin. So we have some options now to go a little bit deeper, but in doing a verb that has a compound verb like defundo, and then following it more deeply to just the kind of root fundo, I wouldn't want you to follow all this stuff up. That's just way too much. But if you can recognize that a verb like diffundo actually leads us to fundo, you've done all the work that I'm actually kind of expecting of you there. So enough for Perseus. While I hope Lewis and Short will do almost everything you want, let's imagine here that you need to go a little bit deeper in your etymological search. Well, you'd go to either play.google or just go within kind of books.google and then search this guy's name, Francis Edward Jackson Valpy, and you'll get this list of books, and then you'll have this etymological dictionary of the Latin language. Well, that sounds promising. We can say, go ahead and read that. So it might, hopefully Google doesn't make you sign up for a Google account. It may, but maybe you already have one. And then here we are in this scanned version of the file. We've got a preface, we've got everything that we might need, and then we can kind of find out what verbs we might go for. So we've got this nice kind of scrubber at the bottom, which can get us to closer to the verbs and things that we might be looking for. Unfortunately here, you can see that every once in a while we get a Latin verb, so we're able to kind of post ourselves where we are in the alphabet, but mostly you just kind of have to pull around and guess and see how close you can get. Let's look for fundo. So here we're getting pretty close. Maybe I can get a little bit, and then once you get within a few letters, you can just scroll down. So here we have funda, a sling, and all this, but we actually want fundo, the verb. So fundo, here we're getting close. Not to lay a bottom of a thing, although that's interesting too. Here we go, fundo, I pour, spill, melt, fuse, cast. That's all we wanted to look up. So here we have a connection to the Greek hudo, which is whence hudor, which is the Greek word for water. So we get a lot of kind of details, also possibly from Hudane Hiwo. This is what Lewis and Short was actually shooting out, and then saying, well, hudo would basically be fudo, this ph, and that's close enough to an F sound. So you can see just from looking at this that Lewis and Short is much more direct, much more helpful. Going over to Jackson Valpy is kind of, well, it's taking a step back in time. Truthfully, this isn't the best etymology. He's kind of compiling everything he's got. He's not using state-of-the-art sources to be able to kind of put this together, but it's interesting to kind of peruse, to know what's out there in these kind of free and publicly available forums. Let's go last to OED, and I would go to OED.com, but I'm not on campus right now. So I have this easy proxy set up, and you would type in just this, OED.com, easyproxy.lib.utah.edu if you are off campus, and that will actually grant you access to the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary. So we were talking about diffundo. We had seen diffuse as a kind of possible. Here you can just enter your unit. You'll be prompted again if you're off campus to do this sort of thing. And now we have a quick search bar. So we could do diffuse, we could do ramification, because we know that's from ramus, or at least I told you already. So if we were to look it up at etymology, we get the story of how it's moved from Latin to our modern time. So they're saying it's actually going through this ramify. It's not coming directly from the noun. It's coming from the verb, coming from this post-classical ramificato. So here we know it's ramus, to a branch, and then this ficat, ramificare, this is kind of to ramify, to make branches. That's exactly what we are looking at. So for here, ramification, often if you're looking for similar words that have the same derivation, you can look over here and see what else might work. So ramified, ramificate, ramiferous, caring, this is a nice, I'm sure if we look this up, this will be many biological entries for different trees having many branches. That's a good sort of way to describe something. Ramiform, having a branch-like shape. So there are lots of things that we can look at here to kind of build out the broader history and the more recent history of some of these Latin words that you're going into depth for. So I hope between here Lewis and Short, looking up original words, but then where needed, going a little bit deeper. Then also going to Valpy, looking at everything that he's got to offer. And then finally the OED will be a useful exercise. I want to encourage you all not to spend too much time on this assignment. Don't go too deep in any one word. The idea is to do 5, to spread things out, to learn some new things, to kind of own some words in a different way than we do in the rest of class. But it's not meant to be an undue burden on your work life, especially coming back from break. So I hope this was useful, and I will see you on Thursday. I look forward to seeing your projects. See you then.